something different. Okay, so I have set my project. I have made a new project. I've set my project already. And in this case, I'm going to go create free image plane. And I'm going to click here. Oops, I am in my front view, so I'm going to go into my perspective view. And you can see that there's a plane sitting in the middle of my workspace, but it's not a primitive. It is a plane that I can put an image onto to use as a reference. So in class you had them open on the side and you just click back and forth, but here you can actually put it inside of Maya, so this is something new, image plane. In your attributes editor over here, you can see the attributes for the image plane, and you can click here on the folder and choose a file to add as your reference. Now I already put the reference I'm going to use into source images in my documents, Maya projects, chess piece project folder preliminarily. So I already put the image in there, and Maya goes straight to the source images when you click on that folder, so you don't have to browse. And if you do pull the image from somewhere else, it's not going to travel with your project. So you'll still be able to use it, but you won't be able, Maya won't know where it is once you move the project. So I'm going to open this, and now here it is. It's in my image plane, and another little bonus here is if you go to your channel box and you go down here into layers, right, you can actually select the image plane. Okay. Go into my selection tool, select, gotta click right here on the outside of it. And down here in layers, under display layer, I can actually create a new layer and assign selected object. So now I have my image plane on a layer, and I can turn the visibility on and off. I can also make it a template, or I can R lock it, which means I can't actually select it or move it, I believe. Yes. Okay, so, but I actually want to unlock this because I do want to move it. So now I'm going to kind of work between all my views, so I have the best way to compare what I'm making to my image plane. I'm going to go into my 4 views, and I'm going to go to my, you know what, I think I might be turned around here, so let me see. I'm just going to go here and go under View, Default View. Oops. View, Default View, and that's my top view. Okay, let's see. This is my front view. Alright, so I'm going to go into my front view, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move the, see how it sits like below my floor plane, so I'm going to just use the move tool to move it up. So I'm going to move it up, let it sit right on the edge there, so my object kind of sits on the edge. Again, you don't have to do this, but it helps you model sort of thinking where the floor is, and I find that helpful. Okay, now it's sitting correctly. Okay, so now I will lock it. Double click. So if I have nothing, it's unlocked. If I have T, it becomes a template, or I'm sorry, it becomes transparent, and if I click again, then it becomes locked. Then I'm going to go and create a cylinder. A couple ways to handle this. I'm going to put the bottom of the cylinder right to the bottom of the pawn. So what I'm going to do is use my middle button to scroll in, and I'm in wireframe mode, by the way. I was working wireframe mode when I was testing this, so I can go into my shading mode, but I'm going to stay in my wireframe mode for the moment. And I'm going to move my pivot point. So I'm going to take my pivot point, hit D, move my pivot point to the bottom of the object, and hit D again. That way it's going to be easier for me to align the bottom of the cylinder with the bottom of the pawn. Go. now I am going to go into my 5 mode, and I'll go into my multiple views, and so here I can see that it's aligned with the bottom of my image plane. Now here it's still in wireframe mode. I'm going to go back to these modes. I'm going to look at it from the side. And if you look at it from the side and from the top, you can see that the image plane is actually sitting in the middle of my object. I actually don't want that, so I'm going to unlock my image plane, select it, and I'm going to move my image plane back in space. I'm going to move it back in space so I can watch where it's going. I'm going to put it behind my object, not too far. See, I can't really see how far in the perspective view, but I can see how far to the left in my top view. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to lock it again. Now, if you're not using the image plane, you can just go and do this by looking at the reference on the side on your desktop. That's fine too, but it's actually faster for me to do this if I have the image right in the Maya window. All right, so I'm going to work from the front again. So I'm going to click my front view plane, and I'm going to select my object. And now remember, my pivot point is down here, which is going to help. I'm going to actually scale it from the bottom. I'm going to scale it up. So because my pivot point is at the bottom, I can now scale it up and just make it the height of the pawn. And it's pretty much the width of the pawn, so I'm going to leave it there. So I'm going to hit my 5 mode. I'm going to go into my 5 mode, and I'm going to see that that's correct. Then I'm going to go into my perspective view. And remember, we talked about in class about working in quads. So if I look at my cylinder from the top, I see that I have to delete some edges. So here I'm going to right-click and go into edge mode, and I can select every other edge and just hit delete to make sure that I have quads, and turn this over upside down. Now I have to remember which ones I deleted. I think it was this one, this one, this one, and this one, and I can hit delete here. Now I have quads, and I believe they match. I'm going to undo that for the moment, and I can show you that there's a way to select through the object. So if I'm looking at the object straight on, I can actually drag select both the top and the bottom edge, but that's a little bit hard to do in the shading mode. So this is a good place to go into wireframe mode so you can actually see what edges you're selecting. Line them up, select through the form, select every other one. Just make sure nothing else is selected. You can kind of tumble around to make sure these are the only edges selected. You can delete them both top and bottom. Again, if this is confusing, just go with one side at a time. I'm going to go into my shading mode. And now I have a cylinder, and I'm going to start adding edge loops just like we did in class. So to do that, I'm going to go into my side mode again, and I'm going to go into my wireframe mode so I can see where to add the edge loops. You select this object, hit F, then it'll zoom in and I can deselect it. It'll focus, focus whatever you selected in the middle of the screen. I'm going to go to my insert edge loop tool, and I'm going to sort of anticipate where I'm going to need edge loops. Now, if I have my image plane and I'm working in my side view like this, it's very easy to figure out sort of where I'm going to need these edge loops because I'm looking at all the edges right here. And it doesn't mean that I have all of them. It just means that I have the preliminary ones, and it'll be pretty easy to add them or delete them later. So here I have my edge loops, and then I'm going to go into my edge mode, and I'm going to start scaling them. So I'll go into my scale tool and I'll double click. Now this is where you have to be careful, because as you start scaling, you really want to see all the views because sometimes you'll find that your cylinder gets distorted because you're not scaling correctly. So let me start with the top view, the top edge, and see also you can see here they didn't select all the way around the edge because these are not sort of, I guess, regular quads, so it's not cutting through them with the selection. If I double click, it's not getting all the edge, and you can just shift click and manually select that. And you can scale from the center to create sort of a tapering at the top to create that roundness. Go back in here. I think I need another edge loop here, so I'll just insert that right away. And I will go into the scale tool. Make sure I've selected everything, and I will scale out. Now here it's kind of hard to see if you're matching the size exactly, but if you go into this view, you can't tell. So it's really nice, especially if you have a big screen, to sort of work in all these views at the same time. Then I'll double click and select this edge loop. I can tumble around here. If I'm hovering over this window, I can hit F and I can zoom in on what I have selected, and I can tumble around, make sure I've selected the whole edge loop. And if I scale from the center, I can scale this in. Now here, if I double click here, shift double click here, I've grabbed both of those edge loops. And I'm going to scale them together, and I'm going to scale them in this view because I want to make sure that I'm scaling them on these two axes, on the X and Z axis, but not the Y axis. I could also have done them one at a time. So there's a million ways to do it, and you know, in terms of sequence, you can sort of pick and choose how you want to do it. I'm just kind of trying to figure out what's working in this particular instance. When I have one edge loop, I can scale from the middle because it really only exists in one dimension, but when I selected two, I couldn't have scaled it from the middle because it would have scaled out and up and down. That's why I use the top view to do it, because it only allows the scaling in this plane, if that makes any sense. Okay, so I think I need another edge loop here to create this sort of tapering shape. If I hover over here, I've selected the whole thing. It goes all the way around, and I can go into my scale tool and I will scale that in. And I'll just continue. And I'm watching how the scaling is going. Now, something happened here. Let me go back to this one. F. This one should be more in, I believe. There we go. I can't see very well. My screen is not so big. I'm working on my laptop, but I'll show you how the adjustments will work later. Something happened here. Roll over this one. See, I didn't grab the entire edge loop. And here, this is going to be, just going to go into the perspective view for a second. Tumble around. See, it's not selecting the entire edge loop because these quads are the funky quads. So you have to do it by hand in this case. Just because they're not regular quads, they don't sort of continue the pattern, the mesh. Go back here, and now I can get that whole base, And just to zoom in here, I think I'm missing something. Yeah, there's my base. And then I can push this one in, and I'm going to move them around a little bit. I'll move this one up, double click here, move this one up, and probably I can move this one up just a little. Oops, didn't grab all of it. That's the problem with that bottom edge loop. I'm just going to leave it like this. The idea is to get kind of close, so I'll hit the shaded mode, and I'll hit the 3 mode, and I'll see that it's, you know, not too bad. So I can edge loop it. It's close. I'm not going to try to get it exact, although I'm going to do a little bit of tweaking. But you guys can do your own tweaking. I just want to make sure that you know how this works structurally. So I'm going to go back into 1 mode. I don't need an edge loop here, but I do need one here. So edge loop tool. And we want this angle to be sharp. And this, I think I'm going to leave round, but I want here to be sharp. This one will be round, and this one will be round. So let's check it in 3. So this is already looking a little bit more like a pawn. Oops. Be my selection tool so I can see the smooth preview without all the extra lines. Now I need something here. Let's see, where is that? That would be this line. Go back into my edge loop tool. Going back into the selection tool. If you're getting all these extra lines, you're still in the edge loop tool. That didn't seem to help very much. So let's see. Maybe if I select this edge loop and go into my 3 mode, into my 1 mode, I can scale this out again. Oops, not moving. That was wrong. I would have to undo that. I'll scale this out. And maybe I'll scale this one out a little bit. And actually, I think to make that ridge a little bit more believable, I'll just push it down. So once you have an edge loop selected, you can not only scale it, but you can move it up and down. I'm going to try my 3 mode again. And see, that's a much better edge. Perspective view. So I can kind of get around a little bit better. At some point, I don't want to rely on the reference anymore. I just want to make sure that my design looks good, and it definitely feels like it needs some edge looping here. We're going to create that ridge. And probably here. Try the 3 again. And that's starting to look a little bit more believable. Let me get out of the edge loop tool and turn on my modes again. Let's see. Right click, deselect all. I'll turn off the wireframe unshaded here because I just want to see how the shading goes. So it's not exactly that pawn, but it's, you know, it's pretty close. I'm going to try a couple more things to make it a little bit closer, and then I will add materials. You can get as close as you want, but this could take a while. So because it's a tutorial, I don't want you to have to wait that long. But I will do a couple more things. Select it, hit F so it focuses it in my screen. Hit 1 to go into the low poly mode. And I realize I need an edge loop on the bottom here. So edge loop here. And here, see what's happening, because these are strange strange quads, my edge loop wants to go somewhere else. And I still need an edge loop here, so I have to figure out how to make that happen. In this case, I'm going to, I think, use the extrude tool. So I'll select the face. Oops, don't want to be in my edge loop tool anymore. I'll select the face and I will hit extrude. And I'll go with my world manipulator. So you see how here the extruder is kind of off center. This is the center of my grid. If I hit this little thing here, that's the world manipulator. It'll orient all the scaling to the X, Y, and Z axis of my world. And I've already extruded, so there is a second set of faces there. And then if I hit scale, I can scale the faces to the center, creating the second set of edge loops that I need. Get out of that tool and hit 3, and now I have a flat bottom. There's another way of doing this using the multi-cut tool, but this is a lot simpler, I find. And let's see, the other thing here, there's a little bit of like a dip here. So I'm going to go back into my one mode, and I will, I think, go into my edge mode. And I will scale this in a little bit. I think that is going to do the job if I scale this in more like that. And I will hit the one mode and scale it out a little bit like this. So I'm going to go back into 3 mode. Now something I can do is I can actually make some of these adjustments in the smooth preview mode, because I can kind of tell better, right, what I'm adjusting if I'm looking at it in smooth preview mode. But the trick is that you can't do too much of that, because you're not actually seeing things where they physically are. You're just seeing it how the smooth preview is previewing it. So you can get into trouble with overlaps and things like that. So you have to be really careful. Mostly work in the low poly mode, the one mode. And I realize I need an edge loop here. This edge is not so sharp. I'm going to do another change. I'm going to move this edge down just a little bit so it's getting that nice slope, and then I will edge loop it. Again, out of the edge loop tool and try 3 again. That looks like it has a more believable shape for a chess piece. Again, it's not quite perfect yet. The last thing, I can't help myself. I'm going to do a couple things here because it's not round the way I want it to be. So, and I'll do this in smooth preview. If I double click and I hit my scale tool again, maybe make it a little bit lower here, a little bit more tapered here, sorry, and starting to get, I don't want to move too much in a smooth poly, in a smooth preview mode. Ooh, talking, losing my talking. So I will come back up here. I'll shift click these edges, because remember, they don't want to, I can't select them with a double click, and I will move them down a little bit so it's not, it looks more round. Oops, forgot the point. I will, this gives me the opportunity to show you the vertex mode, so I'll go into the vertex mode, hit that point, and move that down as well. So you can see that I can adjust points and edge loops. I can move them up and down. I can scale them. I'm going to go back into my insert edge loop tool, and I'm going to actually give this a couple more edge loops just so I can control the shape a little bit more. And I will go back into my scale tool, double click, and try to make this a slightly rounder shape. Go into my 3 preview. Ooh, it's a little squished, so I'm going to do this in my smooth preview. I don't like that. So here, this is important. I'm not going to delete. I'm going to control delete. I'm going to control delete here, or up here it is not merge vertices. Where's that tool? Delete the selected poly components, or control delete will delete the edge loop and the vertices, so your geometry stays really clean. I think I'm going to delete this one too. So I'm going to delete selected poly components, and maybe for the purpose of this demo, I will live with the mostly pointy head of the pawn, but I'm going to give it another try. Select this vertex and move it down. That's rounder. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. By the way, I made a big mistake in this video tutorial. I hope you guys noticed that I haven't saved yet, so I'm going to go save scene. I haven't saved my scene yet, and I'm going to save pawn 01. I'm going to save as. Now, next time I make changes, I'm going to add some color in the next video, and I will save it as a second version of this scene. Oh, I noticed here I have way too many edge loops. I do not need that many edge loops, so I'm going to go into my edge mode, double click to select this one, double click to select this one, and I'm going to control click or delete the selected poly components, and right, because we want as few edge loops as possible.